Yo, what's up guys? It's Noah here, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down the 3-game NFL slate for Thanksgiving Day for this Thursday. Got a 3-gamer like we always do every single year. Every Thanksgiving, NFL always puts out 3 games, one after the other. You'll have a day or a game like starting off during the daytime, starting at noon. You have a game after that, following that in the afternoon, and then you'll have your late night game after the afternoon game. So you have one game after the other. Makes for a very fun sweat. I always look forward to the Thanksgiving Day slate every year. The contests are always huge as well, like Draftkings, Yahoo, FanDuel, like they're all running out big contests. Pretty sure Draftkings putting out a Millionaire Maker for this 3-game slate. There's just a lot more action. More casual players play on this 3-gamer. It just makes for a really fun slate. You know, it kind of sucks that we have like the same teams playing every year, it seems. Like it seems like the Cowboys, the Lions play every Thanksgiving Day. Like I wish they would mix up the teams, but it is what it is. Still look forward to this 3-gamer every year. We'll break down this slate like we always do. We'll go quarterback through tight end. We'll talk about my favorite plays for this 3-game slate. We'll build out an early core of 5 players that I really like. We'll talk about DraftKings pricing. We'll hit on some guys I like over on Yahoo as well. But before we do get started, guys, as always, I would appreciate it if you would hit that like button down below. If you are new to the channel, be sure to click the subscribe button as well. I do upload a ton of NFL content to this YouTube channel. Obviously, I'll have videos up for the main slate. You know, I'm getting this video up early on in the week. I won't be, at my computer on Thanksgiving Day. I won't be able to make any content then, but wanted to go ahead and get this video up. I'll still have my video up for the main slate, most likely on Friday. So, still got a ton of NFL content coming out this week. If you are new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Click the notification bell so that way you do get notified every time I upload and you'll never miss out on any of my new videos. And if you do really enjoy my videos and if they help you out a lot and you want to check out more content from me, I do have stuff available on Patreon that is linked down below in the description. For those of you that are interested, the Patreon is linked down below. But let's go ahead and take a look at this 3-game slate, and we will start off at quarterback like we always do. So at the top of the position this year, Deshawn Watson leads the pack, $7,400 on DraftKings. He's the most expensive QB on DK, and he's also the most expensive QB on Yahoo, coming in at $37. So I think Deshawn Watson is clearly the top quarterback on the slate. I think he definitely projects the highest. I think, probably even points per dollar, he still looks like one of the best quarterbacks. It's hard to get away from Watson here. He's just been so good, pretty much since like week 3 or week 4, pretty much after Bill O'Brien got fired. I mean, Deshawn Watson has been awesome. Week 4 against Minnesota, he kind of started his upward trend. He got off to a really slow start this year against KC, Baltimore, and Pitt, 21, 15, 18 DK points. But since then, 23, 29, 35, 27, 24. He had that game against Cleveland, which, I don't want to factor that game in too much because the weather was really bad. It was really windy. The Texans just couldn't really move the ball that game. You take that one out, and he's been over 23 DraftKings points. Pretty much, yeah, he's been over 23 DK points pretty much in every game since week 4, besides the Cleveland game, which, like I said, the weather kind of really just had a huge impact. Watson wasn't really able to get things going in that game. Really, though, Watson's been a beast since week 4. Now he gets to face the Lions, a team that, we shouldn't really be worried about too much on the defensive end. I mean, it's a great spot for Deshaun Watson. I think he's the best quarterback on the slate. I think he's the guy that I want to try and pay up for. Like, if I'm only playing one lineup, Deshaun Watson's probably the guy that I build around. Like, if you're playing cash games, I think you want to try and pay up for Deshaun Watson. The pricing, it's pretty soft on DraftKings. Like, you can kind of play whoever you want. I mean, the most expensive player outside of Deshaun Watson is Terry McLaurin, and he is $7K. So there's really no one priced above $7,400, which kind of shows you how soft the pricing is. You can really fit in a lot of stud players. I think I want to try and pay up at quarterback. I like Deshaun Watson the most. Even on Yahoo, where he's $37 and he's really expensive, I still think he's worth the salary there. Like, we know this guy has easy upside to go for 300 yards, multiple touchdowns. He's got rushing upside as well. That's something that I always look for. I want quarterbacks that are mobile, that can add on the ground, and Deshaun Watson can do that. Last week, 36 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. Week 9 against Jacksonville, 50 rushing yards and a rushing not a rushing touchdown, but 50 rushing yards in that game. Like, he could easily give you 30, 40 rushing yards and potentially score in the red zone as well. Like, they've been using him a lot in the red zone. He's been running a lot. They haven't really been handing it off to Duke Johnson in the red zone, which kind of helps Deshaun Watson, just gives him more upside. Like, even if they get down to the goal line, it's not a lot that they just turn around and hand it off to Duke Johnson. Like, they'll let Deshaun throw it. They'll let Deshaun run it. his ceiling is just by far the highest on this slate, in my opinion. So I do like Deshawn Watson the most. My second favorite quarterback, though, behind Watson would be Lamar Jackson. So Lamar Jackson's been someone that, I've played a good amount this year. Even on his bad weeks, I did play him some, though, in his good weeks. Like, I remember he really did me good in that Philly game, 31 DK points. He did have his best game of the season against the Eagles. He's had some bad games, though. He did face this Pittsburgh team in Week 8. The turnovers really killed him in that game. He did have two fumbles. He had 3 fumbles in that game, but 2 of them, were turnovers. He also had 2 interceptions as well. Like, he turned the ball over 4 times in that game. He still managed to finish with 18 Draftkings points. I mean, you take away the turnovers, and he finishes with, 22 DK points. So, turnovers killed him. He still had 208 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. He also added 65 rushing yards through the ground. I mean, if there's anyone, well, I know Lamar Jackson is a better rusher than Deshaun Watson is, but, like, Watson and Jackson are by far the 2 most mobile quarterbacks. I mean, they're really the only mobile quarterbacks on this slate. Like, Ben's not going to run much at all. I mean, Stafford's not going to run. Andy Dalton's not really going to run. Alex Smith, he might give you 5, 10 rushing yards, but he's not much of a scrambler. So, like, Watson, Jackson, those are the only 2 mobile quarterbacks on this slate that really can give you, 6, 7, 8 points with their legs. Jackson, we know, I mean, this guy has slate-breaking upside still with his legs. Like, he can get the 100-yard bonus. He has done it before this year. I believe a couple weeks ago he had 100 rushing yards. It was the game against Philly that he had 108 rushing yards, which is really what, kind of gave him that big game. Also had a rushing touchdown, got the 100-yard bonus. Like, if there's anyone that can come close to Deshaun Watson, I think it is Lamar Jackson. It's a tough matchup without a doubt, but Baltimore is going to be without J.K. Dobbins. They're going to be without Mark Ingram. Maybe we see them throw the ball a little bit more than they normally would. I mean, last time they played Pittsburgh, Lamar did throw the ball 28 times, which is kind of a lot for him. This isn't a team that wants to throw the ball much. They want to just run the ball as much as possible, but are they going to be able to do that against the Steelers defense? I don't really know. Right now they're 4-point underdogs on the road. This feels like a game where maybe Lamar has to throw a little bit more, or maybe he just has to run more himself, given that, the top 2 running backs for Baltimore are going to be out. I like Lamar Jackson quite a bit. I do prefer him over Big Ben. I think for me personally, like, I want to play Watson or Lamar. Big Ben, I think is fine to go to, but what is his upside at this point? Like, he needs to throw for 350 yards and multiple touchdowns to really pay off, whereas, Lamar can only throw for 150 yards and a touchdown, but he can give you 80, 90 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. Like, it's just so hard for these, kind of statues, these pocket quarterbacks to really outscore these elite mobile rushing QBs. Like, sure, Big Ben can throw for 330 yards and 4 touchdowns like he did against Cincy, but he could also, kind of floor out and maybe only get 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, which is what he did against Baltimore back in Week 8, 182 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, I think, me personally, I'd rather play Lamar over Big Ben. I'd rather play Watson over Big Ben, obviously. I've been playing mobile quarterbacks this year. These guys that just stand in the pocket that, don't give you rushing upside, it's hard for them to really hit a ceiling, whereas, Lamar, Watson, even if they don't have the best game, passing-wise, they can still give you points through the ground, which is very important to me. So my favorite quarterbacks are definitely Deshaun and Lamar. Stafford, Dalton, Alex Smith, like, I don't really see myself going to these guys unless I'm looking to, like, game stack or something. Stafford's been so up and down this year. One week he'll have a good week. The next week he'll just come out and completely crap the bed. He looked terrible in that game against the Panthers. Turned the ball over, I believe. Or he didn't turn the ball over any, but he was getting sacked a ton in that game. I think the Panthers got like 5 or 6 sacks on Matthew Stafford. I think he's been dealing with an injury as well that seemed to bother him. Like, it's a good matchup against Houston. It's the best game environment by far. This Detroit game does have the highest total right now at 51. So, this is going to be a game we want to get exposure to, but do I want to play Matthew Stafford with how bad he's looked, with how inconsistent he's been? Like, probably not. I think if I'm going to go cheap at quarterback between Stafford, Dalton, or Smith, I think Andy Dalton's my favorite. 5,600, he's pretty affordable. It's not like we really need the value, but Dalton does have some upside. He put up 20 DK points last week against Minnesota in his first game back from his concussion, or I think it was a concussion that he had to deal with that made him miss like 3 or 4 games. First game back, he did have 20 DK points. Like, Dalton has weapons with this Cowboys team. He's got 3 really good receivers in Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb. He's got Zeke out of the backfield. Dalton Schultz has still been, producing pretty well. So I like Dalton the most as a value between him, Stafford, and Smith. If I'm going to go cheap, he's my favorite guy. So probably ranking the 6 quarterbacks, I think I would go Watson number 1. When you factor in price, I'd go Watson number 1, Lamar number 2, Dalton 3, Big Ben 4, and then between Stafford and Smith, I think it's pretty close. Probably Stafford 5, Alex Smith 6. Really, I don't see myself playing Stafford or Smith, though, unless I'm playing like a lot of lineups, which normally on this Thanksgiving Day slate, I'm not going to be at my computer. I'm not going to be able to really, manage a lot of lineups. So normally I only play a few lineups, if not just one lineup on this Thanksgiving Day slate. But yeah, that's just how I would rank the quarterbacks, the 6 quarterbacks for this week. So I think we covered that position. Let's go ahead and move on to running back now. So the running back position, no really expensive options here besides Zeke. I should say Zeke, most expensive is $6,800, but there's no like 8K, 9K running backs we have to, try and jam in. Zeke is too cheap in my opinion. Like, he should not be $6,800, even like on a full slate. When Zeke's like last week, he was like $6,500. I thought he was a little bit too cheap. On a 3-game slate, like, they should have priced Zeke up a little bit more. He's only $6,800. He's really easy to get in. He finally had a good game last week, and I talked about him in my video last week. Like, the big game for Zeke was eventually going to come. He wasn't going to keep being as bad and as inefficient as he has been the last few weeks. He's had some tougher matchups as well. This isn't the best spot. Washington has a really good defense. They have a solid front 7. They're pretty good against the run. Zeke really struggled against them earlier this year, but he's back at home in the Dome where he seems to always play well. Like, Zeke has always had better splits at home than on the road. We know the volume's going to be there. 21 touches or 21 carries last week, also got 2 receptions. 20 touches the game before that, 20 touches the game before that. Like, Zeke's getting the volume. We know if they get down to the goal line, Zeke is going to be punching the ball in. I still like him a lot, and because he's only $6,800 and not like 8K or $8,500, it's hard for me to really get away from Zeke at his price. So definitely one of the top running backs for me, especially if DeAndre Swift does not play. Now, if DeAndre Swift plays, I think I would actually rather play Swift over Zeke. But right now, it doesn't look like Swift's going to play. He did not participate in their estimated practice on Monday. We haven't gotten Tuesday's practice reports yet, but I would be surprised if Swift participates Tuesday. He's still got a clear concussion protocol by Thursday, so signs are not pointing to him really being able to suit up. Maybe that could change from now till Thursday. I'm recording this video on Tuesday afternoon, but I'm expecting Swift to be out again, which does make Zeke the top running back for me, $6,800. Now on Yahoo, I think it's a bit of a different story because they actually did price up Zeke. He's $32, whereas Swift is the next most expensive, and Swift is $23. So you got a pretty big discount dropping down from Zeke to Swift. Now, like I said, I don't expect Swift to play, but if you drop down to the next guy, which is Antonio Gibson, he's 21. Like, do I want to pay $32 for Zeke when I can get Gibson for 21, even James Conner for 20? I don't think I'm going to be going to Zeke on Yahoo. I just think he's a little bit too expensive. I don't think he's worth the $32 salary. I think he does project similarly to Swift and to Gibson and to Conner. But on DraftKings, Zeke's so closely priced to those guys, I would just rather play Zeke because I think his workload is just the most secure. Yahoo, though, it's a bit of a different story. I think Antonio Gibson probably looks like the best option on Yahoo, assuming that Swift does not play. Now, if Swift plays, $23, he's going to be my favorite running back, but I like Gibson a lot at $21. It is a really good matchup for him against Dallas. This Dallas defense, the run, the pass, it just hasn't mattered. They've just been bad against both the run and the pass this year. We saw back in Week 7 or Week 8 when these two teams played, Gibson did have a really good game. He got 20 carries, had 128 yards, and a touchdown. Look, he's getting the volume right now. Last week he got 17 touches. The week before that he got 17 touches. Like, he's getting the volume right now. When they get down to the goal line, I expect Gibson to be the guy punching it in. He's kind of getting like a workhorse type work at this point, workhorse type usage. He's getting 15, 16, 17 touches a game, sometimes more, depending on how game script sets up. In games where Washington's playing from behind, we might see more J.D. McKissick. In games where they're playing from ahead, we'll obviously see a lot of Gibson. I think this could be a game that's probably back and forth. It's going to be close. I'd expect Gibson to be out there a ton. I think he's going to see his normal, 65, 70% share of the snaps. I like Gibson a good amount. I think at $6K on DraftKings, you could definitely go to him as well, but on Yahoo, where he's $11 cheaper than Zeke is, I think I'd actually take the savings and play Gibson at $21. I like Gibson on DraftKings as well, but given they're pretty closely priced between him and Zeke, I think I do prefer Zeke over Gibson there. So kind of site specific. Zeke on DraftKings for me, Gibson on Yahoo. But then you got a guy like Duke Johnson who has absolutely killed me the last 2 weeks. I've been very heavy on him. He's been one of my favorite plays the last 2 weeks. He was in my core plays last week, and it did not work out. He's getting the usage. I mean, he's playing a ton. Like, he's on the field for, it seems like, every snap. I know his snap percentage came down a little bit last week, but he got 13 touches last week. He got 14 the week before that. I thought once David Johnson went down that Duke was going to be a workhorse type back and just get workhorse type usage. And while he has been on the field a ton, like, they haven't really been using him. When they get down to the goal line, like I said, they're not just handing it off to Duke Johnson. Like, they were down at the goal line a bunch last game, and Deshawn scored. It seemed like every time they were in the red zone. This is the best matchup he's had by far. I mean, he had to face Cleveland, tough spot. He had to face the Patriots, not the best spot. Well, now he gets to face the Lions. I mean, the Lions have been god-awful against the run this season. They've allowed a lot of receptions to running backs as well, and we know Duke Johnson can catch balls. He will be used in the passing game. Like, if there was ever a spot for Duke Johnson to finally do something, like, this would be it against this Lions team. I don't know if I can trust him, though. Like, he's burned me the last 2 weeks. I think because it's a 3-game slate and the player pool is so limited that I will still have exposure to Duke. Even if I'm only playing like 2 or 3 lineups, I will still want some exposure to him. I just don't think he's going to be like a guy that I'm heavily on, just because I feel like there's still potential for him to bust even against a bad Detroit team. Even in a good matchup, like, there's still potential for him to put up 6, 7, 8 DraftKings points. You do have James Conner for a bit more, who's probably a safer play than Duke. It's a tougher matchup against Baltimore, but we know Conner's going to get the work. I mean, he's on the field a ton. Got unlucky last week that Benny Snell got the 1-yard touchdown. Like, if you give Conner that touchdown over Snell, I mean, he's going to finish with 19 DK points, which is a really good score. I mean, he was efficient last week. He got 13 carries, 89 yards, averaged almost 7 yards per carry. Also got some work in the passing game. We know Conner's going to get 3-4 targets. He's going to get probably 12 to 15 carries. If they get down to the goal line, I normally expect Conner to be the guy punching it in. I know they've used Benny Snell some near the goal line, but normally it's going to be Conner getting those touchdowns. 6,200. Between him and Gibson, I think I'd rather play Gibson. Between him and Zeke, I'd rather play Zeke. But between Duke and Conner, I think that's close for me. Probably would give the slight edge to Conner. But both guys are going to be more of tournament plays for me, like not going to be in my core or in my main lineup. Whereas Zeke, Gibson, I do expect to be the most overweight on at running back. And then obviously, if Swift does play, then Swift I'll have a lot of interest in as well. But then scrolling down, like, we definitely got to talk about the Ravens situation. J.K. Dobbins, Mark Ingram, both tested positive, so they are both going to be out for this game. We will talk about Gus Edwards, who is really cheap. J.D. McKissic could be a guy you look to if you think Dallas gets a big lead in this game and that Washington's playing from behind. Right now, Washington is they're 3-point underdogs, so maybe they could be playing from behind this game. You could see J.D. McKissic get some usage in the passing game. That's where he really, does his damage, is in the passing game. For 5,100, though, I think I'd rather just drop down to, like, Kirian Johnson if Swift's out, or I'd just rather play Gus Edwards, who's $1,000 cheaper. McKissic's not a bad option, but, not going to be a guy that I'm too heavy on this slate. The Detroit running backs I do want to talk about. So, assuming that Swift does not play, you have Adrian Peterson for 4,700. You have Kirian Johnson for 4,300. It is a really good matchup for these guys, assuming Swift's out. Like, Houston has been really bad against the run this year. I believe they've allowed the second most rushing yards per game. They actually have allowed the most rushing yards per game. So, really good spot for these Lions running backs. Last week, Kirian Johnson was kind of the guy. Like, he didn't get a ton of volume, mainly because they were playing from behind, but he was on the field a good amount. I believe he played like 70% of the snaps, whereas AP was only on like 30% of the snaps. Peterson got 7 carries for 18 yards, was targeted once in the passing game. If we look at Kirian Johnson, he was more involved later in the game. 6 carries for 17 yards, also got 5 targets, 2 receptions for 21 yards. If you're forcing me to play one of these Lions running backs, I do prefer Kirian Johnson. I just think he's the more talented running back. I think he just has more upside. He'll get used in the passing game as well. If Swift is out, I don't mind Kirian Johnson for 4,300. But even though Gus Edwards is going to be more popular, I still think I'd prefer Gus Edwards over Johnson. Gus Edwards, I do expect to get a pretty heavy workload. No Mark Ingram, no J.K. Dobbins. Like, he's the next man up. I know they have Justice Hill behind Edwards, but Hill really hasn't been used at all this season. Like, he's barely played, whereas Gus Edwards has still been active and still been getting touches, even as their third-string running back. Now, with the top 2 guys out, Gus Edwards will be the starter, should get good usage, and we saw Week 8 against Pittsburgh. Mark Ingram was out that game. Gus Edwards got 16 carries for 87 yards. Also had a rushing touchdown, and he did get 1 target. Not a guy that's going to get much usage in the passing game, but if he's going to get 14, 15, 16 carries with goal line work, I like Gus Edwards a lot. He's minimum salary. He's $4K. Pittsburgh has a really, really good defense, but the work is going to be there. The usage is going to be there for Edwards, and he is really cheap, so he looks like one of the better values. $4K on Draftkings. Also coming in very cheap on Yahoo, only $13 over there. Right now, I think Edwards is one of the better, just values overall on this slate. I know he's going to be popular, but it's hard not to like him here, with the top 2 running backs out for the Ravens and with how much this team wants to run the ball. I think Gus Edwards has the potential to see 20-plus touches, and if he's going to get the goal line work too, if they get down to the goal line and Gus Edwards punches in a touchdown, he's easily going to pay off his salary. I could see a scenario where maybe he's not efficient, maybe he only averages 3 yards per carry. Let's say he gets 15 carries, averages 3 yards per carry, so he gets 45 yards, and then he gets, a goal line touchdown. Well, that's 10.5 points. If he gets maybe a catch or 2 for a couple yards, let's say he gets 2 catches for 10 yards, that's 3 more points. So there's easily a path for him to get 13, 15 points, if not more than that. Things could definitely go his way, and maybe he gets multiple goal line touchdowns. You just don't really know. I do know that the work's going to be there, though. He should be the number 1 back, should be the starter. Like I said, Justice Hill is going to be behind him and will get involved some, but Edwards should be the main guy, should be the number 1, and he's the guy I like most from the Ravens backfield. And right now, he looks like one of the better values just overall on this slate. But let's go ahead and move on to receiver now. Receiver, definitely a position we also want to try and spend up at. Have a lot of good options here. You got Terry McLaurin in a great spot against the Cowboys. Love Terry McLaurin on this slate. I think he's one of the top plays overall, one of the top spend-up options, at least for me. Facing this Cowboys team that has not been able to stop anyone this season. The Cowboys have had a terrible defense. They've had a terrible secondary. We saw McLaurin have a really good game against Dallas back in Week 7. 7 catches, 90 yards, and a touchdown on 11 targets. Had 22 DK points against Dallas. He's still, even with Alex Smith at quarterbacks, McLaurin is still getting targeted a lot. 7 to 8 targets pretty much every game at the minimum. We know he has the upside to get, or the potential to see, double-digit targets, if not more. I like McLaurin. I think he's the best receiver play on the slate. I'm going to be trying to fit him in, especially if I'm playing a cash lineup or a one lineup, a main lineup. I'm going to be building around Terry McLaurin. I like him on both sides. 7K on DK, $27 on Yahoo. He's my favorite pay-up option at the receiver position. Just think he has so much upside against this Dallas team in the Dome. This game does have, the lower total. It's got a 46 total. The Houston-Detroit game has a 51 total. The Pittsburgh-Ravens game has a 45 total. I think that maybe this Washington-Dallas game could go over the total. I could see this coming to a little bit of a shootout. I think both these offenses can move the ball against these defenses. With Andy Dalton back for Dallas, I do expect their offense to be much more efficient, to just be better overall. Washington has a good defense, but this Cowboys offense is still really talented in my opinion, even with Dalton at quarterback. And we know how bad this Cowboys defense is, so I do expect Washington to be able to move the ball pretty well against Dallas. I like the over in this game, which might be a little bit of a hot take, but I'm definitely going to want some exposure to this Dallas-Washington game. I really like McLaurin on the Washington side. I really like Antonio Gibson on the Dallas side. I think the receivers look really good once again. CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper are both pretty cheap in the 5K range. Michael Gallup is dirt cheap again. He's $3,500. We talked about Zeke, who's obviously a good play. Dalton Schultz, we'll talk about a tight end, could be a cheap option. There's a lot of guys I like in this game. So McLaurin, one of my favorite plays overall. I like him a ton on both sides. But then Will Fuller, the next guy behind him, I think Will Fuller is also a really good play, and I'm definitely going to be looking to stack him up with Deshawn Watson. Look, when healthy this season, Will Fuller's been a beast for fantasy. He's got over 100 yards or a touchdown in almost every game except their last 2. He's definitely started to trend down in their last 2, but those have been tougher matchups. The Cleveland game also, there was a bunch of weather in that game. Now we're getting a really good matchup for Will Fuller in a dome, in a game that has the highest total on the slate. This is definitely a spot where Will Fuller can really get on track, and we can finally see him have another big game, 100 yards and a touchdown. That's definitely in his range of outcomes. $6,400 is not that expensive either. Will Fuller is my next favorite receiver, and you should still be able to get both those guys in, even McLaurin and Fuller, even though they're expensive. We got Gus Edwards as a value. We have some cheap tight ends we can play. You can always go cheap at defense. There's even some cheap receivers that I like, so I'm going to try and fit in Fuller as well. I want to stack him up with Deshaun Watson. That's definitely my favorite quarterback receiver stack on this 2-gamer or on this 3-game slate. I talked about Lamar Jackson and how I do like him, but we know Lamar can be a bit tough when it comes to stacking. Lamar can have games where he does it himself and puts up 30 points and none of his receivers really do much. We'll have games where maybe he locks in with Mark Andrews a couple times. Like if you were going to stack up anyone else, I think it would be probably Lamar and Mark Andrews for me. But by far my favorite quarterback receiver stack is Watson to Fuller. Not really going out on a limb there, but I do like the spot a lot for Will Fuller. I don't expect this Lions defense to really do much at all against this Houston offense. I do expect Houston to put up plenty of points, to be able to move the ball pretty easily, and Will Fuller, just such a talented receiver, clearly one of the top plays. But then you have the Steelers receivers. You got Deontay Johnson, 6,200. You got Chase Claypool, 6,100. Look, when Deontay Johnson has been healthy, like this dude has been a beast for fantasy. Double-digit targets in 3 straight games. The only games where he hasn't seen double-digit targets were games where he got hurt. Got hurt against Baltimore, got hurt against Philly, got hurt against Houston, and then those were the 3 games where he got hurt. But other than that, 10 targets week 1 against the Giants, 13 against Denver in week 2, week 7 against Tennessee, 15 targets, and then last 3 weeks, 10, 11, and 16 targets. Like, he is getting targeted a ton. This Baltimore defense is obviously really good, but if Deontay Johnson is just going to keep seeing this high amount of volume, this crazy market share of targets, I'm just going to keep playing him. Like, I liked him last week. Obviously, on a 3-game slate, I'm going to have interest in him again. Now, between like him and Will Fuller, obviously Will Fuller's in a way better matchup, so I think I do give the slight edge to Fuller. But you could still go to Deontay Johnson. I think he's definitely in play. Between him and Chase Claypool, I think it's very close between the two. I think it's really a coin flip. Claypool's also been getting targeted a ton. 9, 13, 10, 8 targets his last 3 games. He's been scoring touchdowns. It seems like every week Chase Claypool scores. I think he scored a touchdown almost every game this season. Like, let's see. Week 9 he didn't score. Week 9, week 7 he didn't score. I mean, I guess he's had more games than I thought, but, it seems like the dude's scoring just about every week. He's got 10 touchdowns on the season. He scored a touchdown in pretty much every game this year, or at least he's averaging a touchdown per game, 10 touchdowns through 10 games. Look, 6,100, with him so closely priced to Deontay Johnson, I think I'd give the slight edge to Johnson just because I think Johnson's target floor is a little bit higher, but the upside's obviously there for Claypool, especially if they're just going to keep targeting him so much near the red zone, which is where he's been used a ton. If he's going to keep scoring touchdowns, he's obviously going to be a guy you want to have. But with the pricing being so close between the two, I think I do give the slight edge to Deontay. Then you got Kenny Golladay for $6K, who I don't really know. I'm not sure what his status is. This is definitely a 50-50. I don't really expect DeAndre Swift to play, but Kenny Golladay could definitely play. He was listed as a limited participant on Monday's estimated practice. So, maybe he gets in there on Tuesday. We'll just have to wait and see. If Kenny Golladay does play, I think I do have some interest in him at $6K. I think he's going to be lower owned than he should be, especially if he's listed as questionable heading into Thursday. Like, people are not going to want to play Golladay if he's got that Q tag next to his name. I do like Golladay here if he's able to play. Now, obviously, I still prefer Will Fuller, but in tournaments, I don't think Galladay's going to get as much ownership as he should if he doesn't get ruled in until Thursday morning. Definitely going to be something we need to keep an eye on heading to Thursday. If Golladay plays, I have a lot of interest in him in tournaments. Juju Smith-Schuster, one injury we'll need to watch as well. He got hurt last week against Jacksonville late in the game. We'll need to keep an eye on his status. Even if he does play here, I still think I'd prefer Claypool and Deontay over Juju, but you could look to Juju. He's not that expensive. He's $5,900. Still would prefer the other guys priced above him, though. Even for cheaper, you got Amari Cooper, who I do like a lot here. $5,700. Look, Amari Cooper's just going to keep getting the volume. I still think he's underpriced, for the talent this guy has. We haven't really gotten a big game from him since Dak went down. Andy Dalton took over. I believe it was week 6 against Arizona, and he did have a good game week 6 against Arizona. Kind of came late in garbage time. I know he scored a touchdown really late in that game that kind of propelled him over the top. Hasn't really had that big blow-up game since Dak went down, but we know the upside is there. We know this is one of the most explosive receivers in the league. He's a great route runner. He's always got big playability. At home as well in Dallas, Amari Cooper, very similar to Zeke, has always been better at home. Since he's been with the Cowboys, he's just always had better home splits. I think the upside's there, and at $5,700, that's too low of a price tag for Amari Cooper just for the raw talent that he has. I do like him a lot on this slate. I think in that 5K range, he's definitely my favorite receiver in the 5K range just overall. I like him a lot on Yahoo as well. He's really, really cheap over on Yahoo. He's only $16. Definitely think Amari Cooper makes a lot of sense over on Yahoo if you're looking for a cheaper receiver to play. Marvin Jones you could look to, assuming Galladay's out. Like, he's been getting the targets with Galladay out. 6 targets, 10 targets. Only got 4 against Minnesota, but he did score in that game. He scored 2 touchdowns in their last 3 games since Galladay went down. This is going to be dependent on what happens with Galladay, but if Galladay's out, I think you could play Marvin Jones. I still would rather go to Amari Cooper, though. CeeDee Lamb, I think, is also a guy you could look to. He's going to get probably 6 to 8 targets, very similar to Amari Cooper. We know he's got, obviously, touchdown upside. Like, he's definitely scored a lot of touchdowns this season, scored 4 touchdowns, whereas Amari Cooper, I believe, has 2 touchdowns. So, that's definitely something that Amari Cooper's kind of ran bad in, is the touchdown department. Only 2 touchdowns on the year. You would expect, with how good of a season he's had, especially beginning of the year, that he would have more than 2 TDs. But I like both Dallas receivers. I do give the edge to Amari Cooper, but I think CeeDee Lamb is definitely in play. Brandon Cooks you could look to as well. I think double stacks with Watson, Fuller, and Cooks makes so much sense. Like, I don't know how many people are going to stack both those 2 guys or all 3 of those guys up together, but we've seen games that Deshawn Watson can go for 350 yards, 3 touchdowns, and we could see a scenario where Brandon Cooks has 100 yards and a touchdown and Will Fuller has 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, that's definitely in the range of outcomes. Cooks has just been so good. The targets have been there as well. Like, no Randall Cobb either. Like, Randall Cobb got injured, and I believe he's going to be out for a while, so that just makes me feel even better about some of these secondary Texans receivers. It's definitely going to be Cooks and Fuller I'm most confident in. You could maybe look to a guy like Kenny Stills or Kiki Kuti, but if I'm playing these Texans pass catchers, I want to go to Fuller. I want to go to Cooks. Cooks for $5,300 is too cheap in my opinion. He's going to get the volume. We know this Texans team throws the ball a ton. It's a good matchup as well against the Lions. It's close between Cooper and Cooks. I think I do give the edge to Cooper because I think he's going to be much lower owned, but I think those are probably my 2 favorite plays in the 5K range. Amari Cooper, $5,700. Brandon Cooks, $5,300. I like both those guys a lot. I think both those guys are really strong plays. But then for value, if we're going cheap at receiver, I think my favorite cheap play is Michael Gallup. I got burned on Michael Gallup last week. He was in my main lineup. I played a good amount of him in tournaments. I thought there was just too much upside for him to be $3,700 in a matchup against the Vikings. Like, there was just too much upside for me to not want to play him at that price. Now he's even cheaper here against Washington. Not as good of a matchup, but look, the targets are going to be there. We know Dallas, they're going to throw the ball 30, 35 times. They've been getting behind a lot as well. This isn't a game where I'd expect that to happen, but you never really know. This Cowboys defense is so bad that we could see maybe Washington get up to an early lead and the Cowboys are forced to throw. And, with Andy Dalton at quarterback, I do feel better about Gallup, Lamb, Cooper, rather than when, DiNucci was in there or Garrett Gilbert was in there. Like, Dalton can at least get these guys the ball. We saw Gallup get targeted 5 times last week, 7 targets before that, 12 targets the week before that. Like, he still has the upside to see double-digit targets, and for $3,500, that's just too low for a price. That's too low of a price tag for the guy with Michael Gallup's talent. I think, if I'm going cheap at receiver, if I'm going to play like a punt receiver under 4K or under 5K, he burned me last week, but Michael Gallup, $3,500, I like a lot, once again, as a cheap option if you are looking to go cheap at this position. But, let's go ahead and hit on tight end just real quick before we do end the video. So, tight end, I think, is kind of straightforward for me. Tight end's always been a gross position. It's been pretty bad this year. Even on the main slate, it's hard picking out like good tight ends to play. On a 3-game slate, it's going to be even tougher. But I think the clear best pay-up option, if you can fit him in, is Mark Andrews. He's $5,200. It's a terrible matchup, but he's just the most talented tight end on the slate, in my opinion. He has the most upside. I think his floor is the highest as well. Like, even if Andrews has a bad game, he can still give you 8 to 10 points, whereas some of these other tight ends, if they have floor games, like, they could legit give you 2, 3, maybe even 4 points. Like, even though it's a tough matchup, I like Mark Andrews a lot, $5,200. I just think he's the tight end I feel the most confident in. If there's a tight end that could go for 100 yards and a touchdown, it's probably going to be Mark Andrews. He nearly did it last week. Obviously, this is not the same matchup, but, week 8 against Pittsburgh, he was targeted 6 times, only 3 catches for 32 yards, 6 fantasy points. Obviously, that's not what we're looking for here. But in a game where the Ravens are dogs, where they maybe have to throw a little bit more, maybe with the injuries or the illnesses to the running backs with them missing Dobbins and Ingram, maybe we see the Ravens throw the ball a little bit more than they normally would. We know Andrews is going to get targeted a ton in the red zone. He's always a touchdown threat. Like, he's got the upside to catch multiple touchdowns. At $5,200, he's the tight end I'm definitely the most confident in on this slate. So I do want to try and fit in Andrews into my main lineup if I can. But if I'm looking to go a little bit cheaper, I think Dalton Schultz is by far my favorite cheap guy, $3,800. Like, if I'm not paying up for Andrews, then I'm probably just going to drop down to Dalton Schultz. He's still been getting good volume as well. 6 to 8 targets their last 3 games. 8, 7, and 6. Those have been his target numbers. Just their last 3. He did score last week against Minnesota. 4 catches, 25 yards, and a touchdown. Andy Dalton back at quarterback. That's good for Dalton Schultz. That's really just good for this Cowboys offense as a whole. It's definitely an upgrade over Gilbert, and it's an upgrade over Ben DiNucci. Washington this season has struggled to tight ends, I believe, as well, in terms of fantasy points, like allowed to the position. He didn't have the best game week 7 against Washington when they did play, but, the Cowboys were just terrible offensively that game. I would expect them to be much better here. They looked much better last week. I would assume they keep that momentum going heading into this game. At 3,800, Dalton Schultz easily has the upside to get you 4 catches, 50 yards, and a touchdown, which could be, 16 points. That could be the most that any tight end scores. Like, I don't think there's going to be really a tight end that, breaks the slate. It's just, just got to hope your tight end doesn't completely bail out and, give you 2 points, 3 points. Like, if you get 8 to 10 points from your tight end on this slate, you're probably going to be pretty happy, because I don't really see a scenario where any of these tight ends go for, 30 points. Like, that's just not going to happen. At least I would be very surprised if it does. So, getting 10, 12 points from Schultz, 13, 15 points from Andrews, that's kind of what I'm looking for. So, those are the 2 guys I like most, Andrews and Schultz. Eric Ebron, I think, is fine for 4,100. This is a Steelers team that does throw the ball a lot. Ebron, another guy that's going to get targeted in the red zone. We saw against Baltimore, he did find the end zone against them. 4 catches, 48 yards, and a touchdown, 14.8 DK points. He's kind of in that range between him. You got Andrews for 52, you got Schultz for 38, and then you got Ebron for 41. It's close between Schultz and Ebron. I think I'd probably just take the savings and play Schultz, but I guess if I did have to rank the tight ends, it probably would go Andrews 1 when you factor in price, Andrews number 1, Schultz number 2, Ebron 3, and then between Hockenson, Thomas, Atkins, Fales, I don't really like any of those guys. I guess if I had to play one, it would be Hockenson, just because I think he's the most talented. I think his volume's the most secure. But, we've seen Hockenson has a pretty low floor this year. Logan Thomas can obviously just completely crap the bed. He has such a low floor. The tight ends aren't really used much in Houston. When Atkins and Fales are both healthy, I just rarely play them. Probably not going to play them here. So, yeah, I think that's probably it for the tight end position. I think we covered, tight end as a whole. So, that's really it for me. Quarterback through tight end. I think we broke everything down for this Thanksgiving Day slate. I hope you guys did enjoy the video. I do appreciate you watching. If you enjoyed, hit that like button down below before you do get out of here. Hit the subscribe button as well. Be sure to click that notification bell so that way you do get notified every time I upload. You'll never miss out on any of my new videos. And if you do really enjoy these videos, if they help you out a lot, be sure to hit that subscribe button, like I said. And also, if you want to check out my Patreon content, that is linked down below in the description. You can check that out if that does interest you. I do post a lot on Patreon. I do provide an article for every Sunday main slate. I also give core plays for every showdown slate and for every main slate. And I will have some core plays for this Thanksgiving Day slate. So all that can be accessed on Patreon. If that does interest you, the link is down below in the description. But best of luck this week, guys. Hope you have a great Thanksgiving. Enjoy the day. Let's win some money. And we will see you on Friday for the main slate breakdown. Best of luck, guys. Peace.